So you think fighting with a sword is as simple as just grabbing the damn thing and swinging as hard as you can? Time to get edumacated. If that is indeed what some of you think, I can't even blame you. I mean, the portrayal of sword fighting in the media, movies, video games, etc. is pretty much like that. Whoever is bigger and meaner and more aggressive and overswings most impressively wins. Unless you have the fancy technical twirly type who just jumps all over the place and rolls over someone's back and does backflips and dances around until somebody mysteriously dies. But of course, real historical sword fighting is a little bit different. And if you haven't practiced a historical martial art, it may be difficult to just fathom how complex it can be. So just to give you a bit of an example, I'll talk about several different ways, a variety of ways in which you can strike with a sword. So this is not supposed to be instructional, it's just supposed to give you an impression of how many variables are involved, if you will. So you can just pick it up with a hammer grip and just, swing hard, but that's not going to be very effective. It's going to be effective at transmitting blunt impact force, but most likely the edge is going to be off, you're not going to be cutting very efficiently, and all of that. But how do you actually do it? Well, it depends a lot on the weapon, the style, well, your interpretation of the style, what the situation requires at the time, and so on. So this is one way to do it, gripping it with, in a hammer grip and striking like this. However, even if you just take the simple diagonal downward cut, there is quite a number of different ways in which you can do it. For example, do you keep your arm straight, swing like this? Do you try to give it some forward motion to essentially turn the cut into a push cut? Do you keep the sword very close to your body for this really pronounced slicing draw cut? With a two-handed sword, do you swing with the main hand? So do you push it with the main hand, or do you pull with the offhand? Already here we have a number of variations, and that's not even going into the details of how you generate power, how you grip the sword, which fingers tense up more than others and when, how far forward the sword is angled during the cut, and so on and so forth. Some blade types lend themselves more towards one technique rather than another, like a strongly curved blade, like on this shamshir for example, wouldn't really be ideal for this kind of movement. So throwing the blade out in more of a cleaving, chopping action like this, it still has a certain slicing action because you do have a rotation, of course, and depending on how much follow through there is, this can still cut, of course. There is this misconception that European straight swords were just used in pure chopping action that crushes its way through the target supposedly, but if you have a sharp blade, there's always going to be a cut. This is still rotation, right? It does not impact like this. So, but regardless, this wouldn't be terribly effective with a strongly curved blade like this. This really relies more on a slice. So I'm just going to do that in the other direction. So I could either throw it out like this and then draw it in. Now this is exaggerated, but just so you see what I mean. Or I could keep it closer to the body in the first place for a stronger slicing action. If I tried that with a side sword here, that wouldn't be terribly effective for a number of reasons. For one, because of the way the handle and guard is shaped, you're supposed to put the index finger here. So that is really to facilitate thrusts and long distance cuts, basically. So, I mean, I could grip it differently and then try to go for the slice, but there is really not much of a point because that's not what this blade shape is designed for. You can see with a cut like this, you have a lot more reach. Depending on the situation, I may also want to go for one type of cut over another. For example, say I'm in high guard and I'm fighting somebody who I know has a tendency to simply step back and avoid a cut that way. So if I know that, instead of following through all the way, I may simply cut to long point and then step and chase them with a thrust. And some cuts defeat certain others. For example, if my opponent throws a downward cut to my left side and I throw this cut here from the German manuals, which is translated to thwarting cut, this can beat their blade aside and essentially strike right through their attack and hit them in the head. But there are plenty of ways to mess it up. For example, if I stand with my left leg forward and throw this cut by leading with this arm, you can already see this is very exposed. So if I try this, my arm might be cut before I can even complete it. Also, if I remain with my left foot forward, I cannot rotate far enough. If on the other hand, I keep my arms close to the body at first and then step out with my right foot, it's a lot more effective. And of course, there are plenty of ways to mess up the edge alignment as well. If I start in the follow through and then basically reverse the cut, so you can see if I start from here, this is going to be a good cut. But if I throw it from an awkward position like this, where the edge is not aligned with the direction of the cut, even if I adjust it, meanwhile, it's not going to be as precise as keeping everything aligned throughout the cut. So these are just a handful of examples, and it's just some of what I know so far. The better you get, the more advanced you get in your practice of historical swordsmanship, the more you discover and the more you find all the minute little details, the tiny little things in your movements that you can tweak to make them biomechanically more efficient and, get faster and all of that. There's so much complexity in all of this, which simply doesn't show most of the time. I mean, even if you have actual HEMA practitioners fighting, most of the minor details an untrained person won't even be able to pick up on. In other words, no, you don't just pick up a sword and go raging caveman on your opponent. There's a little more involved. Anyway, hope you found it informative and entertaining. Thanks for watching.